Hi, everybody. My name's John Ciacchio. I am your host today for the Private Eye Nightline. I want to thank everybody for listening in. We have Debbie O'Hara with us today from Accredited Investigations. How are you today, Debbie?
Very good, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. All right, listeners, we got an interesting show today. We're going to be having what we refer to as a roundtable discussion on infidelity in the workplace. The type of relationships that get formed in the workplace, the effects of the infidelity not only in the workplace but also in the marriage. We're going to talk about some experiences we've had with clients and so forth. So let's get started. Debbie, you've been doing private investigative work for domestic clients, I would say, for as long as I've known you, for about 10 years now. So. And I understand that you oversee these as a case manager a lot of times with different, you have a great a communication level with clients, shall I say.
Yes.
So you know firsthand when the client comes to you what the situation is. Can you tell us and the listeners a little bit about the factual issues of the case information when you take a case in? What are they telling you about the workplace affairs, the infidelities today?
Well, with the workplace affairs, normally they're coming home late.
Okay, now, so that's a behavior issue, coming home late. What do you, when a client comes to you and so forth, what's some of the examples that you've seen in the past when regarding work affairs?
Well, what do you mean exactly by that?
Okay, like for instance, have you done any cases recently where there's, that there was workplace infidelity in the workplace?
Yes, workplace affairs are top up there with internet affairs. They work very closely. They do lunch breaks together. They may meet in the morning for coffee. They become very friendly. Mm-hmm. Very close to each other, and they start discussing their personal issues. And it's not so much a sexual thing as it is a companionship. They become friendly at first.
So well, let's back up here. So, yeah, I've also seen that too. Is the workplace is competing very heavily with the internet as far as where the infidelity starts.
Yes.
I know a lot of our businesses that deal with when people meet each other over the internet, but the tolls, the polls out there are being taken now. It says that the workplace is the #1 place where infidelity is bred and where it's created.
Yeah, they're spending more time together. You're at work longer than you are at home with your mate.
So when you say more than sex, is it's like a psychological attraction?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. When it comes to I guess because of the water cooler, the old water cooler meetings, coffee clicks, lunches. I know especially on big companies where they have the group outings and the happy hours and so forth. That's where it breeds a lot of the start.
Christmas parties is a big place where it starts.
Yeah, I remember doing a lot of surveillance work on Christmas parties and happy hours. Let's talk about that in the workplace today. When you have an attraction. All right, and say there's no infidelity engaged, but it's just, I guess, the psychological attraction to a coworker. It starts to, if it doesn't get channeled and doesn't get handled in the right way, it could lead to devastating effects, not only on the home but in the workplace. Because
it most definitely can, because in a lot of workplaces, that's grounds to be fired.
Yeah, I remember doing where, as an investigator, we would document the infidelity, but the client was not the spouse. The client was the employer. And most people don't realize that, but especially in corporate America nowadays, it is grounds for termination. And it could have some serious effects on your career, because what goes around you think is protected, but a lot of times that information gets out and it moves on to your next employer and so forth, and or even for interviews, sometimes that kind of information can get out, and then you know, all of a sudden you're going backwards in your career instead of moving forward. What is some of the industries, you know, that you know, for infidelity to be such an attraction for coworkers in the workplace? What are some of the industries you see that, you know, is it big companies or small companies, mom and pop companies, or, you know, what kind of professions do you see where infidelity is flaring up?
You do see it more or I have in larger companies. You know, you could see a lot in the school environment. Teachers take breaks at the same time, go out for lunch. And like I said, it starts out as a friendship, you know, and then over a period of time, it develops into much more.
The friendship and everything is, I guess you're substituting your spouse for this newfound friendship that you created in the workplace.
Right.
Is it more sexual, or is there more
Not
of a...
necessarily. It could be an ear to lean on. You know, say you're a female teacher and you have a male, you know, your husband has a job that works many hours.
Right.
You come home, you take care of the children, he's not there, and then it's like somebody has your ear. You actually have somebody that's going to sit and listen to you.
So if I have problems on the home front, I take my problems into work, and that special person who I have just started to bond with and have a special relationship or friendship, that's my new person to confide in.
Yes, that's how it can start out, sure. But then it can create a lot of animosity in the workplace. If you get raises or you get special treatment, other employees start to get a little angry, and then gossip starts and it goes down the line, and eventually you could lose your job, or they can make it more difficult to where you can't even work in that environment.
Yeah, and I think when we do our type of work here, investigations and so forth, usually we see that, you know, there's one special, mostly females that have been promoted and climbing the corporate ladder, and the rumor is, was that person entitled because of their experience in education, or did that person sleep
her way to the top?
Yeah,
that's a famous saying.
You know, and we see a lot of times the spouses will call us and say, look, my spouse is in a very successful, high-ranking position, has a lot of exposure to a lot of different people, and we see that's where the interactions start. You know, the lunches, the happy hours, working late, and so forth. It's always got meetings.
Or business trips. That's where it can get even further.
Yeah, and again, that's corporate America, when you're sending teams of employees to close a deal in other cities. The temptation's there.
Right.
I mean, after all, when you go away, you're not. In our business, we call it away games when we do surveillance outside the city or the state. Those employees that we're doing under surveillance aren't working 24 hours a day.
No, they're more relaxed and they let their guard down.
They're freedom. You're right, because they're letting their guard down, and their freedom to escape the regime or being constantly monitored. It affords them liberties and opportunities.
Right.
All right, a little bit. They're telling me we got to go to station break. When we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to pick up right where we left off. Yeah, when we come back too, we're not only going to talk about the workplace, the effects, but also on the home front, because a lot of times these affairs that start in the workplace they're not secret. They're no longer confidential. It gets out in the workplace, but then what was such a embarrassing, situation is no longer protected information, and then the spouse and the children, all that gets exposed to that.
Yes.
So when we come back, we're going to be not only talking about the effects in the workplace, but also the effects in the home and in the communities. Again, my name's John Ciacchio, here with Debbie O'Hara, and we will be back shortly, okay? Thank you, listeners.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi, everybody. Again, John Ciacchio, the host for the Private Eye Nightline, along with Debbie O'Hara from Accredited Investigations. Debbie and I are talking about infidelity in the workplace, the effects, the exposures to the individual, to the spouse, and to the employer. Debbie, right before break, we were talking about some of the effects, and I said, well, how about the when it gets out in the workplace? It can be devastating. It could not only destroy the person's career, but it also could destroy the marriage because these kind of things, especially when in the workplace, when other people, that's when gossip starts, that's when rumors start, and it starts. I know you just had a case involving teachers where one spouse was having multiple affairs.
Right.
And it got out, and the rumors and so forth. And that's really where he learned to hire us, right? The
yes.
spouse?
Yes. We got like I said, a lot of animosity, and rumors starts and gossip start, and they start accusing you of sleeping your way to the top, or they'll harass you, or may even say something to your spouse if they know who your spouse is.
In these infidelities in the workplace, are they? I know they happen, and a lot of times they alter your career. They could be advancement for your career, movement in the corporate up the corporate ladder. A lot of times, if found out, it could be, termination, being fired. That's corporate America. And I found in a lot of the work that I did with clients, it's the smaller mom and pop outfits that you also have to be concerned with. They don't have those corporate procedures, the policies and procedures
Right.
That are that are monitored by human resource personnel and so forth. Some small outfits that you're let your guard down. You're not as professional in the workplace because it's only 2 or 3 people, maybe 5 people in a company, and that's where a lot of the the closeness starts. And that's where the lunches and the happy hours. And we've seen it how many times where the client's spouse says, hey, I have to work late. I had to advance my career. This is what's asked of me. But a lot of times it's not. And we've seen, through our surveillances, we've seen a lot of situations go way beyond an employment setting. We've seen where spouses go to work and put in their 8 hours, and then right after work at 4 or 5 o'clock, they're out with this person. It's not even work related, but they use the employment as a skirt or camouflage to hide behind.
Right, or sometimes they'll meet him even on the way to work.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Early in the morning.
That's a good point, right? Because if you have children, right? Or you got to have dinner on the table by a certain time or whatever. Most spouses don't even think about. They probably look at their spouse. Wow, that's hardworking, dedicated to go in at. If you have to be at work at 8 a.m. to go in at 5 a.m. Okay, you're saying, wow, that's some dedication, but it could not be work at all. It could be the infidelity meeting.
Sure, drop the children off at school, and then from there head on. And meet in an alleyway, meet in a parking lot. Sometimes they don't care where they do it.
Well, the parks, but a lot of times when you say take the kids to school, I've documented some cases where the client's spouse says, "Hey, I have to go in at 4, 5." But they don't. The work doesn't start till 8:30. So it gives them those 3 hours, 4 hours sometimes, depending of the infidelity meeting.
Right.
The meetings that take place and everything, a lot of times it's not sexual.
No, it's not.
It could be for coffee. It could be just to cry all your and complain about what's going on in your own marriage to the other party and everything. On surveillance, when you document the infidelities, how often do you see? Is it like a lot of sexual encounters or no? Is it, are you always catching your subjects in hotels and motels or?
No, they'll meet somewhere, both vehicles. One will get into another vehicle and they could be in there talking, or they could be doing whatever. We leave it up to your imagination. But like you said, it's not always sexual. Sometimes it's an ear, somebody to, a shoulder to cry on, because they feel like they're not getting the attention at home.
Yeah, I tell you, I think it's probably because of TV, where most people think, the infidelity, they're having sex every chance they can get to meet and so forth. A lot of times we document that there's several meetings without any intimacy or sexual contact. A lot of times it's just a meeting, whether it be meeting at the gym or meeting over coffee or whatever. There's a lot of time that's committed to the infidelity affair, and I guess that's because we've seen firsthand that, and then this is what I share with my clients, is with infidelity, if you don't steal time, if you don't feed the time to the infidelity, it will burn out. Just like your marriage, or if you don't dedicate or commit, that infidelity will burn out.
Right.
And I think it's important that, when you're suspecting your spouse of having an infidelity affair in the workplace, to understand, look at the behavior, but find out really what is that commitment. Is it one individual? Is it, meetings outside the workplace, in the workplace? Because I know as an investigator, when we would set up surveillance in the workplace, especially in corporate locations, you always have security to contend with. You have, you're not going to be able to see what goes on behind four walls.
No.
Especially if it's late hours or weekend hours, then nobody's around in the corporate hallways and so forth. You think there's a lot of sexual encounters in the workplace, or do you think they take it outside the workplace?
It could be either or. We have no way of telling.
Yeah, and that's tough, because when a client comes to us and say, "Hey, I want to know what's going on," it's real hard to know what's going on behind four walls. You can't go in there. You have to wait for them to come out.
Right.
I've seen some client spouses get real comfortable and get pretty sloppy with their behavior. Like, for instance, they'll come out of the workplace and they'll kiss each other goodbye right there in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they get so comfortable, they make those kind of mistakes. But then again, I've seen where many of our clients' spouses had so much to lose or so much at risk, they were like almost operation in stealth mode. They were so they were very careful and clever in operating in a covert manner just to hide the infidelity. And it's the only time you would be successful is if you were behind those four walls, because they were so careful, especially in corporate America, which it's been my experience, especially today. If your boss is corporate America, they'll cut you. They will cut you as quick as the litigation. And we see laws starting to change about that as well. The effects of infidelity in the workplace, is it grounds for termination, and so forth? And does it breed, is the employer responsible at all for that infidelity breeding or starting in the workplace, when they could have monitored the situation or corrected the situation?
They could be subjected to a lawsuit from the spouse.
Yeah, especially if they use certain means like cell phones or computers to engage in that infidelity.
That's company issued.
Yeah, and the employer has a right to check the cell phone bills, that not only who you're calling, how long you're talking to that person, and some people don't realize this, but the employer could say, "I suspect John Doe having an infidelity with Jane Smith
Right.
in the workplace."
Mm-hmm.
They could look, if they issue cell phones to them, if they issue laptops or computers to them, they can monitor those cell phones and those laptops to determine how much communication is going on between those two. And then they can go to and measure how much time. Okay, not only is the times, the number of communications, but how long they are. Mm-hmm. They can take a position that it's counterproductive.
Definitely. Those items were given to the employee for work-related purposes.
Right.
So they could say, well, at such and such a time, you were supposed to be working on a report or whatever, and they see that they're doing all personal business on there. They can even monitor their desktop computer. It's their property. They have every right to do what they want.
It's one thing to monitor, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 during corporate America's work hours. But a lot of times they'll use that same phone. They'll use their work email to hide communications from their spouse. They'll use the tools that their employer supplies them with to engage in infidelity communications.
Right.
And that's where it gets real interesting when the employer says, "Wow, I got John Doe making 5 phone calls a night to his coworker, and they're on the phone talking constantly."
Mm-hmm.
And or they're emailing each other back and forth, and it's sexual in nature.
Right, where the spouse has no right to take that cell phone or that laptop computer and have it copied to find out what's on there, because it's not their property. They can go to the employer and request to have that done if there's a suspicion.
That's interesting. What we're going to do is they're telling me we got to go for station break again, Debbie. When we come back, we're going to pick up right where we talked, because on two fronts. One is the spouse wanting to know, what's on those communication tools, whether it be the cell phone or laptop, but the employer too. And sometimes it could be a triangle. All right, listeners. Listen, I want to thank everybody. Please stay tuned. We're going to be going to station break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up. Again, this show is about infidelity in the workplace and the effects and the exposures. Okay, thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Okay, thank you, listeners, for standing by. John Ciacchio, I'm your host with the Private Eye Nightline, and Debbie O'Hara from Accredited Investigations, again, is in the studio this week with us. Thank you, Debbie. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to come into the studio today.
You're very welcome.
All right, Debbie, prior to break, we were talking about the exposures of the infidelity in the workplace, and you were telling the listeners some pretty good things about potentially where there could be litigation against an employer from the employee's spouse.
Even coworkers. If they think you're getting raises or getting preferential treatment, a group of employees can get together and also file a complaint against the employer.
And we've done that work.
Yes.
Believe it or not, I remember getting hired many times. The employees would, would pool their money together, okay, and open up an investigation to prove the infidelity in the workplace between a coworker and their supervisor.
Especially if they think that they were up for that position or for, an advancement. And then somebody that is having an affair with an employer who doesn't deserve it, who hasn't done all the work they have every right to file a complaint.
So it's not only the employer, but it could be a mid-level management personnel.
Yes.
And that could get pretty sticky for corporate America.
Sure.
I know that we, in our past, we were hired many times to disprove and protect a corporate client on an alleged sexual harassment case. And that's where we would have to look at the accuser and try to taint the accuser's credibility and so forth. And a lot of times I learned that it depends in the workplace. If it's a real loose workplace, a lot of times that's where those mistakes start, and that's where you can really get hammered. You're right. It's not only the spouse of an employee employee spouse looking at what's going on in the workplace, but it could be coworkers.
And it could be very difficult working under those conditions.
Yeah, I can only imagine on the litigation side if I'm up for a promotion and I get passed over because so-and-so is sleeping with my boss.
Right.
You know, the exposure to the litigation, but not only that, but it's loss of income. There's some damages there. The career was became my advancement was cut off and removed from me because of this employee's sleeping with my boss. There's a lot of damages I incurred because of that behavior in the workplace.
Right.
Let's talk about the spouse. Okay, whether it be a female or male. You're home at night and you see your spouse carrying on with a coworker using a company cell phone. And they're talking and so forth. And nowadays, cell phones, they're not only good for communication, but you can transfer data and files and pictures and everything back and forth.
Right.
So it's almost like a cell phone's is a little mini computer, where you have access to email, you have access to send and receive photographs, instant messaging, text messaging, all of it's there. But that's a company phone. That's your employer's phone. And the employee's now engaging in that phone to talk to Jane Doe.
Right.
Okay? And the employee's wife is saying, why is he on the phone all night? Why is he talking to her and so forth? You're telling me, and I did see some case law, I think it was out of Oregon, you shared with me and everything, where an employer can be held responsible for the conduct of the employee.
Correct.
And it's not necessarily whether it be on company time. It could be where the relationship first started in the workplace. So if they're having encounters after work hours, that's on the employee and the coworker. But the employer could still be liable because, hey, that's where they started the affair. They're using company equipment, cell phones, laptops to communicate and promote the infidelity and hide the infidelity from their spouse.
Right.
The employer could be on the hook for those kind of issues.
Sure, they can. It's up to them to investigate it.
I haven't did my research, but it'd be real interesting to see. A loss of a marriage it could be a big damage. Especially when you have children and you have income being produced from that marriage. We've been doing infidelity investigations. I know I have for probably 29 years now. It's interesting to understand where most courts are going with the no fault. Who cares whether there's infidelity or not? This is real interesting where what we're talking about is, could an employer be liable for the loss of your marriage if they allowed an infidelity to start in the workplace and continue to grow and breed? It's going to be real interesting to monitor that in the future to see how employers could be held accountable for that.
Right. I'm sure it's true in some states. It's going to vary by state. Not every state's going to adhere to that.
No, I remember back in the 80s when we had fault action divorces, okay, for infidelity and so forth. Most of the states are falling almost like the auto industry, no fault. Well,
right.
Same with divorces now in courts and so forth. But this is interesting where it's two people in a marriage. One commits infidelity inside, and you can sue your spouse's employer for the damage to your marriage because they provided the tools, the coworker environment, and they did nothing to stop it. And in fact, that when they should have. It's going to be interesting to see what the court's perception on that is as this unfolds. I can tell you, work is the second biggest commitment besides marriage. So this does not surprise me. I've seen it firsthand with many of my clients. When infidelity grows in the workplace, it's almost natural because it's the second biggest commitment to your marriage. When I mean by it's almost natural, I mean that if you're not working with your spouse home on your marriage issues, and you have exposure to a social network, which workplace is nowadays,
Right.
okay, and you have all the communication tools afforded you, and you have a loose environment where HR, midline management is not walking the hallways, and these employees are free to talk about whatever and do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's a breeding ground, and that's a bad environment.
Well, like I said, and especially you spent more of your day at the workplace than you do at home.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by it's almost natural. As I tell my clients, it's the second biggest commitment besides your marriage. Okay?
And then work days are getting longer and longer. People are working more hours.
Yeah, and that's usually we'll see that more in white collar than we do the blue collar environments because the unions or the hourly rates,
Right.
You're getting paid by the hour and so forth. It's more controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a salary package or you make the same amount of money whether you work 35 hours or you work 65 hours.
Right.
It's hard to monitor the employee. It's hard for the spouse to check on their spouse to see are they really working these hours or not.
Yes.
And that's usually where we come in when there are signs in that marriage. In the workplace, the hard drive of a computer, the cell phone records, and so forth, all that is fair game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fair game for the employer. It's not fair game for the spouse.
No, we get many calls of spouses wanting to do a hard drive analysis on it could be a laptop computer that they bring home. And if it's not a family-owned computer and it's a work issue computer, we can't do it. We can't touch it. It's not their property.
Yeah, and we do get a lot of calls for that.
Oh, yes. Or work cell phone.
And that's why is because the phone or the computer, that they check their emails on and so forth, when that's issued by the employer,
Mm-hmm.
that person, that employee who's committing or could be engaged in acts of infidelity has more of a comfort level because he knows these cell phone, these computers can't be accessed by his spouse.
Right.
But they can be accessed by his employer.
A lot of people don't realize that.
I know. And I know we've had many clients that were the corporate side saying that, and not only when they suspected, behavior that was questionable, but sometimes just as routine. And, I know a lot of huge corporations now have these spyware, the surveillance software that's already on their servers and operating every minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, just like when we do an infidelity hard drive on a home computer for a client, these corporate software programs, they have search word parameters that will pick up infidelities very quickly. They have programs out there that will tell their employers or their managers to suspect a certain person because of the software that those are searching those search words for.
Now, corporate America can do that.
Right.
A spouse on their personal computer at home cannot do that.
Yeah, but like one of the search words in the corporate America when you're doing spyware is, sex or love. And I'm telling you, it's going to pick it up in the email.
Right.
This is good stuff, Debbie. They're telling me we got to go to break again, so this is we're going to pick up on this as soon as we come back from station break. Okay, listeners? Thank you, and we'll be with you shortly.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated offers a wide array of investigative services to law firms, insurance companies, individuals, private organizations, and corporations. Our goal is to reach the case objectives and resolve the client's issues as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Local investigative services include identity, wrongful death, drug, alcohol, and abuse, and divorce, support, custody, and family investigations. For more information, call or click today. Accredited Investigations, when you need to know.
Accredited Investigations Incorporated. Professional, licensed private detectives with over 28 years of experience, providing comprehensive nationwide services. Our extensive and diverse team offers discreet and confidential consultations. Our state-of-the-art technology and investigative resources allow us to stay in front of other investigative companies. We welcome the opportunity to earn your trust and deliver you the best service in the industry. Call Accredited Investigations Incorporated at 866-821-5258.
You're listening to the Private Eye Nightline with host John Ciacchio. To ask a question or express a concern about today's program, please call toll-free 1-866-472-5788, 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to info@pinightline.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Again, my name's John Ciacchio. I'm your host for the Private Eye Nightline. Debbie O'Hara from Accredited Investigations is in the studio. Thank you, Debbie, for being with us today.
Hi, everyone.
Debbie, prior to station break, we were getting in some pretty interesting stuff. Infidelity in the workplace is the show topic, and we're talking about the tools that an individual will use, an employee, to promote or engage in infidelity, a cell phone and a laptop. We were telling our listeners prior to break that a lot of times we get calls saying, look, I need to dump my husband's cell phone records from his company cell phone. Dump means to get copies of that.
Right.
Or to look at his email and his company email and so forth. And we can't. We just can't. It's illegal to do that, and we tell our clients that. And again, the client is looking for infidelity, but unknown to a lot of people in the workplace, that employer could have software automatically running on their laptops, or may monitor cell phone usage. Is like, for instance, if there's a spike in minutes, or to monitor cell phone usage from a 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. usage.
Sure, that's their personal property.
Personal property being that of the employer.
Yeah.
But let's go to the other side of the spectrum here. What happens if they're sending photographs? And we've seen, in infidelity, they can get some crazy issues with sending some sexual photographs. They'll send that through a work cell phone or a work computer.
Seen that many times.
A lot of times it's the small companies that don't have the sophisticated equipment, the carving tools to do hard drives, or the real professional software or spyware to pick this out.
Right.
I find that when we get calls and it's a small company, they don't have money. IT issues are usually the security of the IT departments are the last thing to be budgeted for. And employees are pretty much are using the computers and the cell phones for whatever.
Right.
But big or small, whether you're corporate America or you're an owner of a small business, the exposure is still there to those individuals to be responsible and accountable for the workplace, to protect and to monitor the behavior in the workplace. So what is a spouse to do then? Okay. If they can't do hard drives on their spouse's computer at work, they can't get access to the emails, they can't get access to the phone records. What is that spouse to do then to find out? Is old-fashioned surveillance, I take it, right?
You could do old-fashioned surveillance, definitely, especially if the spouse is saying they're working late hours.
Okay, can the spouse go to their spouse's boss and say, I suspect infidelity?
Most definitely, and say I want to have the laptop, the computer, or the cell phone checked because I seriously believe there's cheating going on.
A lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, but dealing with a lot of our clients in the past years, spouses were hesitant to do that because when they have children, going to your spouse's employer about infidelity in the workplace could jeopardize the income.
Exactly.
The job,
exactly.
And so forth. And we talked earlier in the show about you get labeled, screwing around in the workplace with infidelity and everything. That could be a real black mark. A lot of those kind of things don't get put in a report or in a job reference. A lot of that stuff is exchanged verbally. And you're pretty much could be blacklisted, especially if it's in what I call real sophisticated employment settings, where we've seen firsthand some of these corporate positions that have no tolerance for this.
Yes.
I mean, even if the infidelities in the workplace is both parties agree to it and engage into it, one or both, and it's not so much a gender issue because we've seen it for not only women and men, but it could be a willing infidelity in the workplace turn sour, and next thing you know, there's a loss of employment, somebody got terminated, there's a sexual harassment suit being filed. It can get real ugly.
Sure can.
And that, then you expose your whole career to that, because if an employer gets sued because of your conduct with a employee, you're done. Yeah, especially in corporate America, you're done.
I don't know how forthcoming an employer would be, though, if a spouse approached them about their suspicions on the cell phone and on the computer.
No, because it would expose them to potential litigation.
Right.
Or, even if they take the information and they fired both employees that were engaging in that illicit behavior, the employer would say, we need to do damage control, we need to to monitor this situation carefully and shut it down, because at any time, one or both of them could be in litigation. It could be sexual harassment against the employer. It could be a lot of exposures. So I agree with you. They're not going to be forthcoming with that employee's spouse. They'll use that information and make their own decisions. And I found corporate America to be less understanding. I found them to be almost cutthroat because they're not going to take in why the infidelity occurred or so forth. They're just going to be shut it down. They're probably going to put bullets in each one of the employees and say goodbye to them and kick them to the curb because they have no tolerance for this. Because when you're being sued as a big employer for sexual harassment, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars just in litigation alone to defend it.
Well, the employer themselves, and we've had cases like this in the past, they may want to call and have surveillance done to show documentation. They might have to have a little bit of a leg to stand on. Just because the spouse comes in and says, I believe my husband or wife is having an affair with another employee, doesn't mean it's so.
Yeah.
So the employer may want to hire us and say, please, I want you to document if indeed this is going on.
Yeah, we seen that with corporate America. They're aware of the situations now that they're faced with. They know that these kind of infidelities in the workplace could turn sexual harassment suits or
Sure.
exposures. In fact, HR, they have counseling programs set up. And I've seen it where sometimes they'll take a no-nonsense approach and just terminate. I've seen other situations where they'll do counseling, confront the employee, and do counseling and do what we call a separation. The department's broken up and disbanded and then reassigned on these employees. That's those kind of decisions I find real interesting, because at any time, once two employees sleep together, especially if one of them is management, you really don't know what's going to happen in the future. All right, well, it's another week here, Debbie, and they're telling me the show's got to come to an end.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah, it sure was. This was a real good topic, and I know for a lot of our listeners, this rings true.
Yeah, yes.
For them at home, and many times, especially when their marriage has some questions, does one spouse start thinking about what's going on in their spouse's workplace? Okay, everybody, my name is John Ciacchio. I am your host for the Private Eye Nightline. I want to thank Debbie O'Hare from Accredited Investigations being in the studio today.
Thank you, John.
And listeners, we will be back next week, Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks again for joining us this week. The Private Eye Nightline will be back next Friday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. John Ciacchio hopes to have you tune in again next week.